Yes, it's actually right here. It's the yearbook from 1988, and
Can we
it's
see you in the 80s?
yeah. This is
You okay with that?
sure. It's this is pretty great. Hi, I'm Cliff Chiang, and I'm a comic book artist, and you're here in my studio in Brooklyn. A lot of it is about perspective and letting yourself experiment. There's a tendency in both digital and hand-drawn art to kind of be too precious about it, and that's when things start to get cold and be less expressive. These days, what I like to do is start off with thumbnails. I used to draw these out on the side of the script, just like little, 3x4 or whatever, little drawings that kind of didn't make sense to anybody but myself. But recently I started actually drawing the layouts digitally, which has been a great help because proportionally all the pages are correct and everything like that. And then when I'm done with that, I can actually just pull it out and, slap it on the page itself. When I was starting as an artist, there's this tradition of good girl art. That was always stuff that I liked to look at, but then you could see that those stories were also kind of limiting as well. When you're dealing with male characters, there's so much of a focus on like machismo and action where we don't get enough of the internal struggles of the characters. It's all just plot, and like what can you blow up and crush and stuff like that. Whereas when you're dealing with female characters, you're able to think more about, what their state of mind is. You're able to delve into their emotional state more. And so those stories, to me, have a lot more heart. And that's why I draw comics. I want to be able to tell stories that people relate to and not just, this kind of summer blockbuster kind of thing. Yeah, with Wonder Woman, it was, knowing that the design, the basic costume design had been done by Jim Lee and Cully Hamner for the New 52. And when I saw it, I saw what they were trying to do, and I tried to push it with my own aesthetics, a little bit further in terms of simplifying some of the lines on her costume and just trying to get to a point where, like, when you strip it all down, what do you need to make her look like Wonder Woman? In doing so, like, I wanted to present a Wonder Woman that was physically formidable as well and commanding, and yet was also seemed warm and compassionate. And so it's a tough balance to strike. I don't know if I always did it, but it was something that I was striving for. That I don't know if I have a perfect platonic ideal of Wonder Woman in my head, but I tried to, draw what I thought was appropriate for the issue. I think being an Asian American kid, you grow up with kind of like a secret identity, but you're able to, you have access to things, at least when I was growing up, that were culturally different from the pop culture that was around you, so they were things like, Asian TV shows and like whenever I'd go, back to Taiwan, with my parents and just seeing these different things. And there was kind of it was kind of okay to be nerdy. And as a result, that kind of opened up a lot of the things that I could be interested in. So, but that wasn't something that I shared with my friends because they weren't into that stuff. So that was kind of my secret home life where my brothers and I would share comics and our love for, cartoons like Speed Racer and Battle of the Planets and that kind of thing. Just in terms of things that recently I've really loved, Beautiful Darkness was a great read, which is strangely about all these little creatures that live inside a little girl. But it's horrifying because what you find out is that the little girl has somehow died and these little creatures are kind of coming out of her and trying to figure out how to live now that their vessel basically is crumbling. I'm a huge fan of Love and Rockets. I just love the intersection of kind of, Latino culture in the 80s and punk rock, and it's not something that people were aware of, and it's important to me because I feel like we haven't quite reached that with Asian Americans. So, I'm always looking at, Love and Rockets and Gilbert and Jaime and how they did it, and realizing now that, they did it because they were just pulling from themselves. So everything is really a work in progress. Nothing is ever set in stone. because I think when you do that, you limit yourself to the possibilities. You know, sometimes you need to, I don't know, be aware that you can reassess what you had done, you know, and try and change it. The medium really asks the reader to engage a lot. You know, you're reading the words, you're seeing the images, you're seeing the page as a whole, but at the same time, you're asked to go from panel to panel, and the story is built up so much in the mind of the reader. So I find that really fascinating, is that, like, you know, there's a visual aspect to it where sometimes you see comics that almost look like animation storyboards, and the action is very, it's very spelled out. And I tend to like it when you take more of those panels out and you're asking the reader to make, you know, leaps between the two panels in order to create the story. And in doing so, you can add to, you know, what something might mean, because there's room for interpretation. So I find it fascinating. I think it makes it different from reading prose. It makes it different from watching a movie. I think it's very active, and that's what I like about it.